meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good. Okay, President Clements. President Clements.
Here.
Vice President Valentine. Trustee Headland.
Here.
Trustee McNown.
Here.
So the approval of the agenda.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So the next meeting of the Haldane Board of Education is a business meeting. It'll be our first business meeting of of the school year. And it's scheduled for Tuesday, September 5th at 2023 at 7 p.m. in the middle school, high school library of the Haldane Central School District. And as far as comments from me, really quite briefly, for all of our families and staff that are and still enjoying the summer, we wish you lots of enjoyment and to take it. Working hard to prepare the district and the grounds for the school year. Thank you very much for all that you're doing. So yeah, wishing everyone a good rest of the summer.
We actually have
Oh, the hearing first. Yeah. So the first thing we're going to do before we get started with the rest of the meeting is hold our public hearing for the Haldane Central School District Safety and Emergency Management Plan. The superintendent distributed this plan to families a while ago, and so the period for comment has been open for a while, but we're still going to hold this hearing for the sorry, I want to make sure I call the right thing, for the Safety and Emergency Management Plan. So I'm opening that hearing now. If there's anyone that has any questions or comments, either from the public or the board, please make them now. All right. Okay, so we're going to close the public hearing and move on with the rest of the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Clements, and again, welcome everyone. We're meeting earlier than we typically do, not only noted by the carpets that have been cleaned and are hanging and drying in the balcony here that the public can't see. When I left my house in a suit, my son said, "We're not there yet, Dad, are we?" I said, "No, but you got a couple more weeks, don't worry." But thank you again to our Board of Education and our members of our community who are with us today. You can see we're in the final preparations for the beginning of the school year. You may have noticed the new wayfinding on campus as you made your way in. We talked about that some time ago. It's been over a year. There were some supply chain issues with that, but we have clear markations now for each of our schools, also to assist any emergency responders who may be responding to our campus to identify each building. And thanks to our facility crews for the installation of that. Schools are in their final preparations. As you noted, probably as you walk through, the floors are being waxed, the classrooms are being cleaned, and again, thanks to our facilities and operations staff for their diligent work over the course of this past summer. You'll notice a number of personnel recommendations on this evening's agenda. We are finalizing our staffing for the upcoming school year. I do look forward to introducing you to Mr. McNeil, who's on the agenda for later in our agenda. And then we're also finalizing over the course of the next 2 weeks a few additional staffing positions, which will be prepared for the board to act on September 5th. I will note, when we get to this point, let's just assume it's a teaching position that we're still hiring for. Those individuals will start at the beginning of the school year. When you act on their appointment on September 5th, it will be retroactive to beginning on September 1st. So that's allowed, that's appropriate. We don't typically do that, but given the timing of the year, in lieu of calling the board to meet again in the last week of August, we can facilitate our business that way as we look forward to the start of the school year. With that, we have quite a bit on the agenda this evening that we'll be discussing, so I'll keep my remarks short. Again, looking forward to the start of the school year with our Board of Education and with our community.
So it's now time for the first opportunity for communication from the public. The Haldane's Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session is reserved for comments or any special presentations or active agenda items. For those who wish to address the board, please sign in and state your name for the record. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. Disparaging remarks and discussions of district personnel are strongly discouraged. Although the board does not engage in dialogue during this period, we're listening. Please know that, and please leave your contact information with our district clerk, Megan Shields, for prompt follow-up from myself or from the superintendent. And if there's no public comment, we can move on. The next section of the agenda is information reports. These are our financial reports that we'll act on in the following month, the next business meeting, actually. And we'll move into consent agenda of the minutes from our last meeting, our reorg meeting. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Next, we have the policy committee minutes from the meeting when we met in July. John, actually, the policy committee just met as well, but so these are from our meeting from last month. And you probably saw a chance, but Megan had the opportunity to get an answer to your question about approving policies, right? Annual review of policies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did it.
And so we did it tonight. And you'll see that on the minutes next time.
Thank you.
So now we'll move into the consent agenda. Financial, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All right. Is there anything you want to say?
If I could highlight just a few items that are included in this for anybody who may be watching or watch the meeting. We have the approval of a cooperative transportation agreement with Garrison, given that we share certain transportation responsibilities for our students are listed here. Our school resource officer agreement for the upcoming school year is also listed here. And the last piece I wanted to mention was the per diem nursing support. In the past, that's new. In the past, we had contracted or worked directly with BOCES in the event that we needed a substitute nurse. BOCES no longer provides that service for school districts. They referred us to the vendors that they had been utilizing. Dr. Cation has gone ahead and secured Pearl Care services for nursing support in the event that we would need it on any given day. We're fortunate to have 2 nurses in our office. Sometimes we need to, so sometimes we don't. And sometimes both nurses are out and we need somebody. So this will cover us in the event that any of those scenarios play out over the course of the school year. And thanks to Dr. Cation for going ahead and setting this up for us.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. So now consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Yes, please.
First, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Ms. Amato is on to be appointed as a teaching assistant, and I see Ms. Amato in the front row here. Ms. Amato has served in a variety of capacities in our school district over the last 2 years that I recall, perhaps further back than that. She was a long-term leave in home and careers for us just 2 years ago. never be forgotten. Great job there. And last year, Ms. Amato, as we secured grant funding through the county, served as an additional school counselor for us last school year and was a great help to us in that capacity. And we're lucky to have her continue with us into this school year as a teaching assistant as of today. So, Kristen, thank you again for that. And I also just wanted to mention again, Mr. Adam McNeil is being recommended to be our next Director of Facilities and Transportation. Adam's in the audience here. I had the chance to say hello to several of our board members prior to the start of the meeting. Adam comes to us by way of Croton-Harmon School District. We had a team of us had the opportunity to meet with Adam, hear about his background experience and his thoughts related to leadership of our Facilities and Transportation Department. We're excited to have him start with us. We feel he has a lot to offer to our team, and he's going to be a really great teammate starting in September. So we have a couple of weeks yet left with your support for Adam to start at the start of the school year with us.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Actually,
Oh, sorry, yes,
I have one
please, go ahead.
question. I noticed appointment of a foreign language instructor.
that's good news.
Is that the outcome of the recommendation from the budget in the spring?
Correct. So Ms. Nowak is, and this was a long search for us. And
Yeah, I know that they're hard to come
Cordelia
by.
is going to be, I think, a really good fit
Great.
for us in our school community. And yes, this is the additional foreign language position that we included in this year's budget now, which initially is set up as partial as secondary support, but also extending foreign language into the intermediate levels. Grades 5 and 6 is what we anticipate to begin to expand our students' exposure to foreign language instruction sooner than what we currently have scheduled. Yep.
Thank you. So, sorry.
No, thank you. I'm glad you pointed that out because that's something that was of an important part of our budget this year. So it's good to let people know. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Okay, congratulations, Kristen.
Yes.
Adam, congratulations.
And thank you for coming. Thanks both of you all for showing up tonight. We appreciate it. All right, so now we're moving into new business. We'll begin with CSE, CPSE recommendations.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the Committees on Special Education and Preschool Special Education as presented. Be it further resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the attached agreement with the Bedford Central School District for the 2023-2024 school year and authorizes the board president to sign the agreement on behalf of the district.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Any comments or questions? Nope. All right. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, and now the approval of the school district safety and emergency management plan that we had the hearing for moments ago.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the Haldane Central School District Safety and Emergency Management Plan for 2023-2024.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Just one comment, just
Yes,
a
please.
reminder to the board that the district-wide safety plan is public and available for public access. The building-specific plans are next on the agenda, and those are confidential.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed?
There's one that you just need to put Mr. McNeil's name in place of Mr. Torrey. But I forget which one it is off the top of my head. I apologize.
Is that in,
It's probably.
Oh, yes,
beginning of
yes, that's
each-
right. That's a really good point.
Contact
Yes.
information fields, yeah.
so I think that's probably an edit that can be made,
Yeah.
just a simple edit. Thanks for noting that, John. And so next to the building level plans, the recommended action.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the Haldane Central School District Building Level School Emergency Response Plans for 2023-2024.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And so now to the approval of the K-12 guidance plan for 23-24.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the K-12 guidance plan for the 2023-2024 school year.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
If I may.
Yes.
That as a reminder to the board, the guidance plan is a fairly new requirement, just a few years old, and is required to be reviewed, updated, and acted upon by the board each year. Dr. Cation facilitated this review. She has a draft there with track changes. Certainly, if there's any questions that the board has, Dr. Cation's here this evening to make herself available to answer any questions you may have about the plan.
I really appreciated the edits. I mean, I thought it was a really thoughtful review and, revision of the plan. I particularly appreciated that it now includes a section on culturally responsive and sustaining education, which is really a big priority for New York State and for the district, as well as just, generally just the thoughtfulness that went into the plan, because it's so important. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. And now for the next item, which is the authorization for the execution of the 22-23 APPR implementation certification form.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the Board President and Superintendent of Schools to execute the 2022-2023 APPR implementation certification form for its annual professional performance review for classroom teachers and building principals covered pursuant to Education Law Section 3012D and Subpart 30-3 of the Rules of the Board of Regents.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
If I may.
Yes.
Talking a lot this evening. This is something that actually we've been operating under a waiver, as all schools in New York State have for the past few years, so the board hasn't actually acted on this item in some time. Each year, we implement a performance review process for our teachers and for our principals. A requirement of that process is that the board certifies that the administration facilitated a process in accordance with the rules and regulations that are outlined each year. So we have. Peggy and I have a form that we have to sign after the board authorizes us to do so, that I have to in turn submit to New York State. It's one of the unique things about the performance review process, and there's very few other rules or regulations, if you will, that we have to certify in such a way, but the performance review process for our teachers and our principals is one of those things. So you may not recall, if you've been here for a while, acting on this, but this is something now moving forward, since we're now in a post-pandemic environment. We no longer are operating under a waiver, so the certification process has to occur.
Thank you for that context. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. So now we're moving to really just, I think, sort of an introductory initial discussion and introduction to the special education audit report, which we now have. Dr.
Regina, do you want to come up and just speak a little bit about the process and the review with PCG?
Sure.
Do I have that right?
Yeah. So Regina Cation, I'm the Director of Pupil Personnel Services here at Haldane. President Clements, it's so nice to see you here. So I just wanted to give you a sense of the timeline. We were able to get a copy of the draft of the audit. We were able to look through it and make a few recommendations in terms of just tightening up some edits. We were able to meet with our leadership team and kind of divide it into sections and do a first, go over analysis. What areas of strength did they recognize? What areas of weakness? How can we turn those into opportunities? And then what are some of the more pressing challenges? So we're just in the beginning phases of that work. On the 21st, we have a meeting with PCG, which is the company that did the audit, and we're going to start early action planning. We're definitely looking for input from the board over the course of the next few months. You don't have to do it tonight, in terms of your thoughts and impressions and what you saw, and certainly as parents and as people who represent the community, getting your input. There's going to be a second action planning meeting sometime in the fall, and I would absolutely welcome a board member to attend or some other representative. And we're going to ask some other stakeholders to attend, and that'll help us prioritize some of the recommendations that were made. We're also thinking about, we're not thinking about, fixing everything in 1 year. This is going to be a journey. It's going to be a process. So we're going to work on some priorities that align with our strategic coherence plan, that are in keeping with some of our Haldane essentials, always with the needs of the children first, and what can we do in the, the first year, second year, third year out. We're going to try to align that with some of our professional development. As you know, we've already started to, we were already aware of some of the issues that were raised and have already made some progress in that direction, so I'm very optimistic about that. On September 19th, PCG will have a representative here to present to the board. They'll have a PowerPoint. They'll try to condense some of the aspects of the report, and that will be a good chance for the public to see the report. I'll also be going to all of the September faculty meetings to give the faculty a chance to have a go-over of the report in advance. But I think it's a good opportunity. We hope to be very transparent in all that we do. We hope to post links to the PowerPoint and to the report on our website. And I do hope to have meetings with, the Learning Differences Committee or any other sort of group that wants to kind of maybe be a partner in some of the work that needs to be done.
Dr. Cashin, when will the report be made available to the public on the website?
Well, I believe that it is already available as with the on board docs tonight.
Yes.
We currently
is
have
it
it in
in?
executive.
That's what I
content,
thought.
but we
Okay.
We do, because it's scheduled to be presented in September.
That's
Okay.
what I was wondering. Like, what were we? Because I'm just curious the timeline. I anticipate there are folks in the community who are looking forward to reading the report.
We wanted to make sure that we gave our staff an opportunity
makes
to
perfect
release it
sense to me,
internally.
yes.
Though in close proximity to when we would then make it publicly available. And that, as Regina had mentioned, that will occur in early September.
Okay, I knew the meetings. I just didn't hear. I didn't catch when it would be on the website. That's right.
And then, as Regina mentioned, the September 19th meeting, PCG will be here, Dr. Cation. There'll be a more extended discussion related to this. It's a workshop meeting, so that'll be the first workshop topic for the school year. And I just wanted to highlight one thing, because I don't want this to be emphasized. Several of the recommendations that were made, I should say for a couple of them, I feel we were already making good headway on. And that's really a credit to Dr. Cation's leadership of the department over the past year and anticipating some of the areas that we had to improve upon. It is an extensive audit. It's 75 pages long. So we also wanted to give the board ample time to dig into it as much or as little as you choose to. I'd encourage you to give at least the executive summary a good read through. And we're about a month away from that September meeting, so that seems like it would be enough time for the board to give it a thorough review.
Right.
Dr. Cation, anything else?
No, I do appreciate the compliment, but obviously this work was in motion, and I think that the values of the board are reflected in some of the changes that have already been made. So I thank you for your continued support in this endeavor.
I would just say that I'm looking forward to, I glanced through it, and did see a nice shout out to, I think you personally, or at least the director of the department, so you should take the glow. I was just gonna, when the consultancy comes and reports, at that point, do you expect to have any early indication for action steps and prioritization, or are you gonna separate and do, this was the bulk of the report and what was assessed, and then separately have after more time, which I understand, this is how we're thinking of what we're going to do next and how we're going to prioritize?
I think a little bit of both, because I think there are certain things like, kids can't wait. They're, if they need, support or changes sooner, we have to address certain things sooner. And so some of the work around, for example, specialized learning, for example, can be and is part of what we're working on now. As I work with our leadership team, we're already looking at how can we embed some of these recommendations into the professional development that's happening now. How can we, we're going to take deeper dives into something like our NWEA scores. How can we, we have this data, we look at the data, but how can we make it even more meaningful by drilling down? And all of that will benefit students who are struggling. It'll help identify them more clearly. It'll help make more targeted interventions. So some of the work is going to be now.
So on the 19th, we'll both hear from them, but also here are our top things that we're either underway already or we expect to roll out over the course of the next 6 months.
I think that would be reasonable to expect at least some direction,
Okay, great, good.
knowing that we're going to continue to do action planning and having it evolve.
Yeah.
I think, if I may, Dr. Cation, I think something we're also trying to balance is your feedback as well. So while Dr. Cation will have the opportunity to engage our staff at the beginning of the school year, we know that the bulk of the time that the board will have to discuss the results of the audit will occur in September. So we don't want to get too far ahead, but we'll give you some idea of how it's taking shape, but we also want to leave room for your feedback as well if there's a strong feeling among the board that what we have listed as maybe priority B really should be priority A. There's space to have that discussion.
Sure. Cool.
But at the very least, I mean, what I heard Dr. Cation say was that there was an awareness that there were some issues. There had been some progress toward making changes. And so I think even highlighting those things at the very least. But with the idea that we'll hear more later on in the year, that sounds great. Thanks, John.
That's great.
Thanks, Dr. Cation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is just for us to have a discussion about the instructional contract between Haldane and Garrison related to high school tuition.
Yeah, if I could just set this up, Peggy,
Yes,
thank you.
thank
So each year, or through previous discussions with the board, we've decided to present any continuation of the instructional contract with Garrison on an annual basis to the Board of Education. Through discussion with Peggy and Maggie as part of agenda prep, we have it on for discussion tonight. But at some point, I would recommend at the next meeting, we have it on as an action item. This is the instructional contract for current or scheduled to be current Garrison 8th graders to attend Haldane for their high school experience. So we need to secure the arrangement or agreement with Garrison before they can then in turn make the option of Haldane available to their students. So this is the beginning of setting that up. You may recall, this is only our second year doing it this way, but this allows Garrison in turn to survey their students and secure between the 3 school options that they have sooner. They had done so usually in the spring. They're now doing so by the end of December. So this begins to allow us to coordinate school visits for the students, which are done in the fall, all the way leading up to their student choice. So it's on for discussion tonight. If the board wants to discuss any of it now, we certainly can. I can provide you with any information that I have. And again, what we're moving towards is action, ideally at our next board meeting.
And setting it up this way will also allow us to get a somewhat earlier idea of how many students we'll be getting.
It does. So by Garrison adjusting its own processes to ascertain where their students are choosing to attend school through the fall, again, it's completed by the end of December. It allows us to have more accurate figures to incorporate as revenue. These are students who are tuitioning in as we go into budget development. The one piece I'm reminded, I'm sorry, I should have included this, that we explored last year was whether or not there would be any changes to the structure of the tuition piece. There is no basis right now to change that in this agreement. It's a consistent agreement. It's reflective of a 2% increase in cost that was discussed with last year's cohort. And I would say with the 3 school option, as Garrison students have, that the arrangement is the same arrangement that Garrison has with Putnam Valley and that they have with O'Neill, and that there really is little incentive to change the structure of that. So as a one school district of three, promoting a discussion around that. There wasn't a real desire to do so.
On their part.
The other schools,
The other
not
schools.
Garrison
The other schools,
necessarily,
right,
but the
it's
other
more
schools, yeah. The
fun
arrangement
for
works for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think of, I don't want to speak of other schools' business, but I think the mindset is for like Pup Valley, it was a new arrangement, so it's a very different mindset entering in than what we had, obviously. And for O'Neill, it's been the arrangement they've had for some time, and it's worked for them.
I just like having it, as long as we keep coming back to it annually in case
Yeah.
instances change, either here or there. It's just nice to know that we're not
Absolutely.
getting locked into anything other than 8th grade to senior year.
Thank you for that, because I read this, originally read it, I saw the signatures on it, I was like, oh, we're done, and, oh, no, we're not, and it was only one set of signatures, so.
Garrison has
Garrison's
acted upon the
done.
contract
And
before
they're-
sending it to
Okay,
us.
fine, great. And same structure and pattern as last year, it's
Yes.
basically for the next year. Okay, do you remember off the top of your head how many students chose which, from the entering 9th grade? The first year that the Garrison students had a 3-school option, how many went where?
Roughly.
Yeah,
I don't know with O'Neill.
okay.
And remember, there's a private school, some students choose to go to private
Yeah,
school
sure,
as well.
yes,
So,
and, yeah.
and at Putt Valley, I believe they were at either 3 or 4.
Okay, yeah,
And I believe, Julia's in the audience, I want to say 13? I'm not sure. Yeah,
I think, yeah, that's fine, that's fine. Okay,
and we average around 13.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
for reference, but I can get the actual figures for Haldane to you.
okay. Okay, cool.
And remind me, the multi-year agreement that was signed with O'Neill, that is still in play, or has Garrison moved into a year-over-year contract?
I believe that's still in play.
So they're still in that?
Yeah,
okay.
but I haven't followed that.
Right,
as
just
obviously
curious, I
as-
couldn't remember if that had elapsed or if they had,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and so now we're going to move into a discussion about the use of the excess fund balance from the 22-23 school year.
So as Catherine's coming up, this is a process we go through at each August where we're closing out the books on the 22-23 school year, excuse me, and we have additional fund balance, and it requires board's authorization to direct these funds in the areas where the administration is recommending. Catherine's going to provide an overview of what the excess fund balance is and the administrative recommendation. I'll step to the side.
Good evening. The best way to see where we're going is to see where we started from. So the first slide gives you an overview of where we stood at the close of the 21-22 school year. At the June 30th, 2022, we had total fund equity of $5.5 million. I listed for you the balance in each of our current reserve accounts. So if you just want to take a moment to see, most of our reserve accounts, you'll see at the end, we feel are funded properly this year. And then we always take out our $645,000 of our appropriated fund balance. That's our standard amount that we used for unexpected expenses. And last year, we had about $800,000 of encumbrances at the end of the year, which left us with our appropriated fund balance, of which about approximately 4% of this year's budget of $1.17 million.
Just before you go, because I can never keep these things straight in my head. Remind me what's the difference between capital and capital repairs? Capital. Yeah.
Sure, capital repair is for a repair. It is a little easier to use. If we have something that needs repaired, we can just do a public hearing and a vote to do it. Capital is for an actual capital project or a replacement. It does require voter approval.
So those need to be tied to. So if we're, as part of the long-term plan, new capital project, new vote, we can allocate some of the capital.
Correct.
Okay, fine.
Correct.
Remind me what EBLAR is.
Sure, that is the Employee Benefit Accrued Liability Reserve,
Okay.
and that we put aside for either an unexpected or a large amount that the district owes an employee upon their separation of the school district with retirement.
Okay. And finally, because I know it's going to come up, when do we pull down on the liability reserve?
We pull from the liability reserve if we ever have a claim against the school district. Any kind of settlement. Mhm.
Could be anything. Okay, fine.
And last year we did have one and we refunded, right.
Yep.
We pulled it out and then we replaced the funds that we used with last year's fund balance allocations.
Thank you.
Okay, so we had unappropriated fund balance of just like I said, just about $1.2 million at the end of 21-22. The next slide just summarizes it. It's the exact same information, except instead of listing the reserves individually, it's just a total of what we have in reserves, just under $3 million. So the change in fund equity happens each year. It can be a positive or a negative change in fund equity based on your revenue and expenditures. This year, we have revenues over expenditures of $481,000, and so we have a positive increase to our fund equity at the end of the 22-23 school year. So we now have a new fund equity at the end of this year, 22-23, of just over $6 million. Again, I show you the total reserves that we have in the different categories and our assigned appropriated fund balance, which never changes, of $645,000. We currently have almost $845,000 of encumbrances, so pretty similar to year-over-year balances, leaving us with an available fund balance at the end of the 22-23 school year of just $1.6 million. As you know, we're allowed to have an undesignated fund balance of 4% of the budget for the next year, which is $1.1 million. I left in an allowance for adjusting entries of $39,000. This meeting, as Dr. Benante said earlier, is about a week earlier than it usually is. We're still very much making closing entries, adjusting entries, balancing accounts, getting ready for the auditors. So we just wanted to leave a little there for any possible adjusting entries. So it shows that we have an excess fund balance that we can apply to reserves of just under $521,000. Here's our history of what we've done with our excess fund balance since the 2016-2017 school year. You'll see on the top line what I'm recommending for this year. We have a total excess of about $521,000. I'm recommending that we completely cover our lunch deficit, which, very good news, our lunch deficit this year was $50,500. Haldane has not seen those levels since the 2017-2018 school year. It feels like we recovered nicely from the free lunch for all of the pandemic years, and a huge shout out to Nancy Norton and her staff in the cafeteria for such good work and attention to budget. So I recommend that we fully fund the lunch deficit. I think that it is smart to continue to fund the liability reserve with just another $50,000, just protecting the district in case of any unexpected claims or any long-term claims that may come up. And I'm recommending that the rest this year goes directly into our capital fund of $420,000. As you know, with the capital or the campus master plan and a possible referendum coming in the next year, this would be a money that we could put aside, and if we wish, could reduce the amount that we have to finance on any type of capital project. So that is what I'm recommending for this year. It is a summary just on the next slide, is just the three reserves that I do, or the cover of the left deficit and the two reserves. And then if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
One last question. The lunch deficit is always retroactive for the previous year? Is that
It's
correct?
from the 22-23 school year.
Okay, got it.
I think we, John, you may be remembering, we would carry some of the deficit,
Yeah.
but we paid it off in full last year.
Yeah, yeah. I remember.
Yeah. So we started whole this year in that.
Great.
Anyone?
Oh, go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
Oh, I just was going to say, I really appreciated the presentation of sort of reminding us where we were last year, and I especially appreciated the presentation of sort of how we've handled the fund balance over the last number of years. I've actually been part of that decision-making for every one of them, but I would not
remember it or have it easily accessible. So having that to refer to, it was very informative, the table. So thank you.
You're welcome.
As a reminder, oftentimes when we talk about capital reserve, I think even in opening meeting, we discussed about, the replacement of the turf field,
Right.
et cetera. And this, the accruing 587 as it stands is the number to which we often refer when we talk about, that's a forthcoming responsibility that we may likely have, and we're adding to that.
And we have a future agenda item to talk about the field turf replacement
Right.
specifically, and how we're going to go about approaching and what strategy we're going to take to replace that turf, because it is coming upon its time. And, so initially we're thinking of doing it tonight, but we didn't
Yeah.
want to put too much before the board, but likely in September, we'll
Great.
talk about what the timeline is for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
All right, and so give Dr. Benante a chance to move. So now the next item on our agenda is the authorization for use of this, as everyone seems to be comfortable with what Ms. Platt and Dr. Benante are proposing. So the recommendation, please.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the use of excess fund balance for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023, in the following manner. Transfer to school lunch fund, $50,500. Transfer to capital reserve, $420,000. Transfer to liability reserve, $50,000.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. And the next item on our agenda is related to confirming the tax rolls, et cetera. So the recommended action, please.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the resolution to confirm the tax rolls, authorize the tax levy, and approve the tax warrant for the 2023-2024 school year.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Just a comment, this is one of the things that always reminds me that we have a part of our school district that is in Dutchess County.
Yes.
And I'm like, every time I'm like, oh yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's such a funny way to do school districts. I mean, anyway, I don't want to
Yes.
go down but there's a lot of states that have moved to countywide school districts throughout the country, and who knows how it happened originally. All right, so now we're going to move into a discussion about potential bus route changes. Dr. Benante.
Yeah, so really, I just wanted to inform the board of a situation that we are continuing to run up against, which is stress on our transportation department. We've seen some positives come out of the summer with hiring and filling positions that had been vacant, but we still feel that we're short, if you will, on drivers. And in continuing to investigate the matter with Mr. Tuardi and Ms. Giordano, our transportation dispatcher, the orange bus route is a route that runs primarily to Forge Gate and Constitution Drive that was added as a route just a few years ago. And in researching that a bit, we had the capacity at that time to run a route to that area. We did have a request from a family to do so, and well-intentioned, and additional students attended or began taking that route to school. Those areas fall within a mile of our school, and we're not transporting other students who reside within a mile of our school. So we made an exception at that particular point. That being said, we just currently don't have the capacity to currently run that route. And the other option, unfortunately, I know it's relatively late in the summer, but to notify, we believe 4 families will be impacted primarily, even though there's approximately their children to school. The school year. These are conversations that I'll have directly with the families. I just wanted to make the board aware. The board doesn't act on bus routes, nor do I want you to. And again, well, maybe no good deed in this case, but I'm struggling to resolve why we opened this up, and I realize in doing so, we now are subjecting ourselves, or myself, to the scrutiny, but we can't cover other routes if we continue this one, and this is the one route. And looking at them all, that makes the sense to reduce, and that we have the ability to, because we're required to transport all of the other students who are taking the other 4 primary buses. So with that, it's informational, but of course, if you have any questions regarding it, I'm happy to answer them.
I totally understand the position that we're in collectively, and I think given what we've seen locally, other transportation can be challenging in terms of how you address it and how you get caught by costs. So totally got that. You said something in the middle, which I've always wondered, which is, where is our legal responsibility? Is it within a mile, like a mile radius? Or
It's actually within 2 miles. Our practice has been to transport within anybody a mile or longer.
2 miles would be like,
It's a hike.
it's a hike and like
It is a literal hike.
90% of the
Right.
student, maybe not 90%, I would think at large.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And our legal responsibility isn't necessarily the practice.
Yeah,
right?
totally get it. Totally get it.
But districts are required legally to provide transportation to any student who lives beyond 2 miles from the school.
Okay, all right. And in the case that we have, this is purely for information rather than, again, I don't want to get in acting on bus routes. If there are students along a route that are within a mile, will we pick them up?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I'd have to,
You may not know.
haven't
either.
asked that
I
question.
okay. All right, cool.
I do think for equity purposes, it's important to be consistent, because I know that there are families that live within the mile radius that, maybe over on the Nelsonville side,
Right.
or that
Yep.
don't also receive that service. So
Right.
I do feel like that's an
yeah,
equitable
and
choice.
I'm grappling with that because I don't know how we
Yeah.
arrived here.
Yeah.
I'm sure I was a part of the decision. But I'm not sure how that didn't come up in the past when we began to do this.
And I don't know how long this route has been in effect.
I believe 2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years. Well, I mean, the point I was going to make was, and maybe the decision was made when there was already such a critical shortage of bus drivers, but it's hard to hire bus
It is.
drivers. And anyway, but I agree. I think the equity issue, and I think it's also really a lesson, like the importance of really sort of following sort of practices, and not a policy per se, but when we deviate from that,
Right.
to really think about it.
One thing I wanted to mention, I know I've spoke with Maggie about this, and Sean Pryor as president, when we examined some of these transportation issues, we have examined, and we do experience at times the need to rent, if you will, or contract with an agency to transport. It's incredibly expensive, given the environment that we're in, and the rate is somewhere in the neighborhood, anywhere between $600 and $750 a day. For a driver, and the vehicle. So you can imagine that's well over $100,000 to an additional cost over the course of a school year. So just for a board's point of reference, that's how expensive it's becoming.
Thank you. All right, so now the next item on the agenda is to discuss the district goals.
I'll just state that this is a draft of the goals for the upcoming school year based on conversations that we had at the Board of Education retreat, or as follow-up. Some of it we didn't discuss explicitly, but I sat with and included. Just a high-level summary, we have goal related to the reconvening the Strategic Coherence Planning Committee. We're quite a bit out from when that committee had initially met. It would be appropriate to reconvene, just to recenter ourselves around our work over these past few years, and re-strategizing if necessary. the campus master plan. There's some additional discussion on the agenda for the fall as it relates to that project. And specifically the elements related to Project 1. We don't have to discuss that now, but at some point in the near future, we should discuss what direction the board would like to take as it relates to that. We have the school climate survey again that I'd like to recommend that we continue as an area of focus. The administration and faculty engaged in extensive discussion last school year as it related to the master schedules between the 3 schools. We have recommendation for action as it relates to those discussions that we'd like to present to the board in September. So more to come, but I plan to discuss that with the board in one of our September meetings. Upon the board's recommendation, the continuation of a goal that was an area of focus last year, but is extending into the school year, which is evaluating our improvement efforts. We have the special education audit, which Dr. Cation has presented in draft form to you this evening. There will be goals extended from that. And then Ms. Jamin and I continue to work on universal pre-K. It continues to be quite an undertaking in finding providers to work with in our community, but I do think that there's renewed interest on the part of some of our pre-K programs in the community, and we've also identified potentially another opportunity or two to at least identify space to facilitate a program. So we have a couple of meetings over the course of the next 2 weeks with community providers that we're going to meet with. So, and there's a heavy emphasis at the state level to put this in place, and I appreciate that. We should have good preschool options. We have them already in our community. That's part of the struggle. But we certainly have the state that's making funding available to us to utilize, and we want to utilize it. So, and that could at least reduce maybe a burden of costs that some of our families are encountering in our community. So we should have a plan of action by the end of the school year, even if we don't have a program up and running.
Is there, we are not rural by some, standards, but, has the state considered, or has there been any lobbying to the state to reconsider some of the limitations that make it more difficult for school districts that don't have access to these?
I can't speak to whether or not they're considering it. They certainly heard it.
Yeah.
They've heard it from me. They've heard it from some of my
Right.
colleagues.
Yeah.
We are in an area where there's several districts like ours who are struggling to get a program started, and we've expressed that to representatives at the education department as well as our local elected officials.
Yeah.
Just 2 comments. As always, and I think in many of them, they're like definable. At the end of the year, how will we know that this goal has been accomplished? And most of them, there is here's the plan for implementation in 2021.
Right.
That's great. So, but keep an eye on that. The other thing I'm cognizant of is that there are 7.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
More than
And
we
while
have.
they're all really good,
5.
I was trying to go through and figure out who was the key lead other than you. And I think on some of them, I've got a sense of who that one might be, but I'm just mindful of
I appreciate that.
collective capacity, because
Yes.
I know everything rolls downhill, but I just want to make sure that that's considered.
Yeah, it is more than we've had in the past. We've typically been capped at, I think, no more than 4.
3,
Yeah, you said 5, 4 or 5, somewhere in there. I think there was a year we had 3. That being said, I would consider a goal like the special education audit. Dr. Cation's going to be leading that work, well immersed in that. And as Regina said before, related to the audit, and I think she was very poignant in saying, and we're talking about kids.
Right.
Right. So there's this impetus on some of these to move forward. Or we're talking about issues that we've had extensive discussion around in previous years, and now we're in a place to act.
Yep.
So it's reflective, like the master scheduling I'd use as an example. You're going to see there's some significant shifts with what we're recommending. But yet this is part of conversations that have been had over the course of 2 school years, or what will be 2 school years. So we're just at a position now to act on the work and dialogue that's taken place. But I certainly appreciate your comments there, John. And the board has been gracious, I will say, in years past, that if there's 7 goals and we, make good progress on 6 of them, I trust that the board will understand on that 7th not saying it's number 7 here, but
You're like,
on one of the
not to
7.
already pick the one that you're not going to do.
No, not 7, but
like-
pre-K is an issue.
And I think we all know that sometime in the middle of the year, something else is going to come up.
Correct.
Right, yeah, so.
Right.
I mean, I also noted the number of goals, but honestly, they make a lot of sense to me because they're a little more specific, I think, some of them than district goals have been in the past. I think they also are the logical either endpoint or next step of what some of these larger goals have been. I do have a question. So when you say utilize the results of the school climate survey to celebrate areas of success and define
It
areas
should
of
be areas
improvement.
for improvement. Yep.
Yeah, sorry. When are you thinking about, so are you thinking about the student and staff
Mm-hmm.
survey that you administered in the spring, or are you thinking about administering to the larger parents again and moving forward?
So the family survey will be administered in the fall.
Yeah.
So we don't yet have those results. That being said, we're on an administrative level, we're actually sitting down tomorrow to discuss the results from the spring in more detail. So as our team works with that, in addition to the family feedback that we get in the fall, we'll coordinate what action areas or what areas we choose to focus on. As the board has seen drafts of this, the climate survey results are extensive. There's many domains. We can't focus on it all. We prioritized a couple of areas last school year. I'd say with mixed results, as it was reflected in this past year's survey, and that's the nature of the work. So we'll continue to do that. So I'm not in a position tonight to say these are our priority areas with respect to climate. We're still defining that, but sometime earlier in the school year, we will have that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just as a reminder, I sent an email about this. We'll be doing our own evaluation at the next
you.
meeting. And so really, because that's a little bit later than we typically do it, I think we want to do two things simultaneously. I think we want to finish that work at our next meeting, but also come with specific ideas for what our goals should be. I don't think, in years past, we've often tried to really align ours, directly to the district goals. That may not make as much sense here unless it's, talking about supporting some number of them, but, yes, just a reminder of those two things.
I have a feeling that we may be coordinating some of those around the campus master planning process. Just foreshadowing it. They may or
Yes,
may
I
not
mean,
be.
definitely, that's
Yeah.
definitely a big, yes.
Great.
Right, and I actually just lost my connection, so I'm looking at I think that was the last.
It was.
That is the last thing. Yeah, all right. So now is an opportunity, for the second opportunity for communication from the public. I don't have exactly what I'm supposed to say, but at this point, it's really open. Anything anybody would like to comment on, this is the time to do it, not limited to the agenda or action items. All right, I think that's it. All right. So I will make a motion to,
Board reflections.
Oh, thanks, I forgot about those. Yes, and superintendent thoughts, thank you very much. Thank you. I saw that little hand. Okay. Are there any board reflections?
Other than welcoming Mr. McNeil, thank you so much for coming this evening. And as you know, it's been a couple of interesting years for us, and we had a wonderful director of facilities before that we felt very strongly about, and Dr. Benante has really given us great confidence that our partnership moving forward is going to be equally as wonderful for us as we look forward. So thank you so much for coming, and thanks for joining the team.
Yeah. And actually, somehow we've gotten into this practice of having people who are being appointed join board meetings, which I really love. And so I also want to thank, I assume that's Ms. Mano for joining us tonight, as well as Mr. McNeil. So I think it's not an expectation necessarily, but it's definitely a very nice practice
at least
to have the opportunity to
Say that
meet
you've
people.
sat through one Board of Ed meeting.
Yeah, also, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. All right.
I have one other thing I wanted to say is that over the summer I took to just sort of peeking in at other other boards and what they do in the region and,
wow,
you know,
that's
what is available, you know, that has been recorded both by our friend over here and others. And I continue to be grateful for the way in which we carry ourselves and how our meetings go and the way that we work together. It's, by comparison, quite, I think, commendable. So I just thank you all for that continued commitment.
Thanks, Sean.
I would just say thank you to all the maintenance and facilities people who
Yeah.
are making the school look fantastic.
So
It comes in, it feels like
bright
we're
and
right around the
shiny.
corner. So
Yeah.
it's great.
It's really
great. I
nice.
know the work that goes in over the summer.
Dr. Benante, you do not have final thoughts?
I do not.
All right, so now I will make a motion to close the meeting. May I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you.